Are you Invictus? Clint, are you Invictus? Are you Invictus?
What does it mean?
You know, when I started the Invictus Mind podcast, my goal was to unite a bunch of people who had a similar ideology or similar characteristic traits. Invictus means unconquerable. So it's an old Greek word for means unconquerable.
Unconquerable.
Honestly, just be totally honest, it was a new concept to me. I had to Google it when you sent it to me. But yeah, I do my best.
Tell me about what the show. What is your audience looking for? Tell me.
This is your first time here. This is the #1 program dedicated to helping individuals maximize their potential and truly become unconquerable. Here we have discussions about what it takes and what it means to experience and magnify political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom.
Yes, I would absolutely say that. I'm going to keep getting up, right? And I keep getting up and I keep pushing forward. And that's the type of mindset that you need to have.
I never lose hope. I never lose faith. My mindset has always been, if I want something, I don't give up. So let me tell you what is the #1 issue when it comes to being unconquerable.
Okay.
And the #1 word you have to think about here is not intelligence, not savvy, not strength, none of those things. The #1 thing is resilience.
You know I'm Invictus, come on. All right, I'm Invictus AF.
Well, may I have an initiation question for my tribe?
Okay.
Are you Invictus?
I believe I am.
So yes, I agree. I am Invictus.
I totally agree, man. And I think that if there's anybody on this planet that's unconquerable, it's probably me. I am not the type to take orders, and I am definitely in a position that I can stand up for myself right now. So.
And I was like, no way, I know what that word means now.
Yeah, man, very cool concept for a show.
You didn't ask me if I was Invictus.
Well, hello. I'm sitting here with Frank King. He is a 6-time TED Talk speaker. He is a comedian. He calls himself the mental health comedian. He's been a writer for 20 years on The Tonight Show, made appearances on Showtime Comedy Club Network, appeared on A&E, Showtime at the Improv, and is open for Jerry Seinfeld, Adam Sandler, Jeff Foxworthy, and Dennis Miller. He's also a certified laugh coach and a stress reduction specialist. How are you doing today, Frank?
Well, the TV credit you missed was on the old Star Search with Ed McMahon. I won 2 rounds and lost to a puppet.
You lost to a puppet?
It's on YouTube. Somebody put it up on YouTube.
Well, when I was looking at your resume, Frank, I was really impressed because of some of the experience you have. Obviously there's a lot to talk about in your comedy career, but I also noticed that you were a coach for businesses and telling people, probably like myself, how to become a TED Talker.
Correct.
And you have some real world experience in a more sober topic, suicide prevention. So
correct.
I thought we'd cover a little bit about that today.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm really interested in your comedy career. I love comedy. I'm thinking back to the days of George Carlin and Richard Pryor, but of course, some of my favorite comedians today are still out there, like Jeff Foxworthy, who you said you've opened with, and of course Adam Sandler too.
Yep.
But, so 34 years in the comedy field. Is that where you started your career?
No, out of college, I sold insurance for 6 years.
Really?
And I wasn't doing comedy, and I realized if I didn't start doing comedy and stop doing insurance, I was going to kill myself sooner rather than later. So my second thought was, what the heck? I could quit my job, divorce my wife, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, hell, I can still kill myself. That's why my third TEDx talk is called Suicide, the Secret of My Success, Dead Man Talking.
Mm-hmm. I can relate. And one fact, I was an insurance salesman for several years of my career as well. So great
business, but I just felt like I was walking around somebody else's life and I wasn't doing comedy. My first night doing comedy at an open mic, April 1st, 1984. Halfway through my routine, I heard a voice inside my head, "You're home." Second thing I heard was, "We're going to do this for a living. We have no idea how, but we are." And then I guess about 7 or 8 months later, went on the road day after Christmas, 85, with my lovely girlfriend, now my wife for 34 years. We were on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, no home.
Yeah, That's a world record, isn't it?
I think it should. If it's not, it should be. Yeah, I'm not in the Guinness book, but yeah, I don't know anybody who did that many nights in a row with no home.
So, what were some of your favorite places you played? I mean, with that many shows, I'm sure you can't remember all of them, but do you have a few of your favorite ones?
Yeah, and by the way, comics generally don't remember their best shows. Worst shows, chapter and verse.
Okay.
Opening up for Foxworthy at the Civic Center in Raleigh, North Carolina, my hometown. I was working at a radio station at the time. And I opened for Randy Travis in Michigan, amphitheater, 5,000 seats, 2 nights, place was packed. Opened for Lou Rawls, 2 shows at the Hotel Del Coronado on New Year's Eve. You'll never find another love like mine. Really nice guy. Opened, worked with Seinfeld in Raleigh, North Carolina, my old hometown. And Ron White of the Blue Collar Comedy Guys, Bill Engvall. Never worked with Larry the Cable Guy, although that's a great story. You want to hear how he became Larry the Cable Guy?
Yeah, please do.
He was living in Florida. I have a friend who was same area at the same time doing comedy, and Larry, the real name's Dan Whitney. Dan was calling into a local radio show and doing impressions, funny impressions and gags. And he called in one morning off the air. They said, look, we love you, Dan, but your stuff's getting kind of stale. Come up with a new character. We'll go ahead and do it today. But, take a couple weeks off, develop some new material. So when they put him on hold, the 2 hosts were talking, and one of the hosts had expected the Cable Guy the day before and was told to be at home from noon to 4. And, of course, the Cable Guy didn't show. So when they picked up the phone with Dan Whitney on the other end to do some comedy, he goes, hey, man, it's Larry the Cable Guy. Sorry to make you out your house yesterday by 4. That's how Larry the Cable Guy was. and it was like a couple of minutes of his act in the beginning, and, of course, it became his act in the end. Now his face is on car air fresheners at Walmart, or that animated movie Cars, where he plays the tow truck, I think.
Right.
And the guy's an industry unto himself.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of his flicks. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and nice guy, by the way, as well.
Okay, awesome. And you went from doing stand-up to becoming a speechwriter for the Tonight Show, correct?
Actually, Jay was the permanent guest host back in the late 80s.
Okay.
And Johnny would pull up on a Friday night and tell his staff, I'm taking next week off, which meant Monday night's Best of Carson, rerun. Mm-hmm. Tuesday through Friday, Jay would have to host, and Jay would have to have 18 jokes per night for the monologue. So he started hiring road comics, as contractors.
Interesting.
To pump in topical jokes. I was sending in 12, 24 topical jokes a day, and I was averaging 1 a week when he was working. And then when he got the job for real, they let a lot of the contract labor go, but they kept me and a couple other guys on. We kept writing by fax or eventually the internet. So the dream was that you would be plucked from obscurity as a fax writer and put on staff inside the building. And it happened to a couple of guys. Never happened to me, but that was the dream.
Okay. So you don't have any comedy specials that we can find on YouTube or anything?
You can find me on YouTube. I'll tell you, go to Frank King, deer hunting.
Okay.
My most requested bit. I've had clients say to me, yeah, we're going to book you for comedy, but you got to do the deer hunting bit. All right, fine. Yeah. So no, you go to YouTube, type in Frank King and comedy. You'll find, Evening at the Improv, Showtime's Comedy Club Network, Showtime's Comedy on the Road, me losing to a puppet on Star Search. Yeah, my career peaked in '89. That's the thing about show business. You never know whether you're on the way up or on the way down. And I didn't realize at the time, because I did Showtime twice that year, and then 3 episodes of Star Search and Evening at the Improv, all in '89. And I thought, man, I'm taking off. Wah, wah.
But you have pivoted in your career. For those who can't see the video, as we're recording an audio podcast as well, you see the TEDx sign in the back, and
very subtle.
You can claim on your career that you are a 6-time TED Talk speaker.
Correct. Yeah, and what happened was, I always wanted to make a living and a difference. Mm-hmm. And after the last recession, 08, 09, and 10, meeting planner said, Frank, listen, we love you. We can't pay you that kind of money anymore just to be funny. You got to teach our audience something. So in 2010 in April, I'd come close enough to killing myself. I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, because we'd filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And I thought, you know what? If I got some training in suicide prevention, I've got the lived experience and the comedy. I could keynote on that. So that's what I became the mental health comedian and had to rebrand because everybody thought it was just funny. Can he do something serious? So I got my first TED Talk in 2014. And I came out on stage as depressed and suicidal. Nobody knew, my family, my friends, my wife. And I talked about suicide prevention. And that allowed me to rebrand with the meeting planners when they saw this super serious, but with humor, TEDx. Then that and from that one I got two more contacted me and said, do you have any more mental health topics? Oh yeah. So I did two more, and then I applied for the fourth, fifth, and sixth one. So, but yeah, it's great for marketing, credibility, visibility, and for a comedian.
Right.
So somebody will take you seriously. So that's how I made the transition from comedy, comedy clubs, whatever, to, so I don't do much comedy anymore unless the client goes, listen, I know you're doing a keynote tomorrow on suicide, but we're having a banquet that night. Can you do 45 minutes of stand up?
Yeah. It seems like, comedy and something as sober as suicide just wouldn't have a place together. But I'm interested in learning how, you mix the two.
How I navigate those waters. The thing is, they want the lived experience, the life story. They want the learning objectives, teach them something. I teach them signs and symptoms of depression and thoughts of suicide, what to do, what to say. And the fact that I can do it with organic, tasteful humor, mostly still funny stories about me, then that's a bonus. They'd much rather listen to me for an hour than a clinician.
Sure.
So it's being a comedian, but there are other aspects of my life. My family, we live with generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mom found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mom and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And like I told you, I came close enough to killing myself. I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. By the way, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger, which usually gets a nervous laugh from the audience. And then I followed up with this. Yeah, a friend of mine was at a keynote and he never heard me say those words. I didn't pull the trigger. So he came up afterwards. He goes, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?
Oh, wow.
That's the kind. And here's the thing. Here's a psychological principle about comedy and tragedy. If you tell somebody something serious and then you lighten the mood briefly with a little humor, then their brain's more prepared to absorb the next serious piece. There's a reason they call it comic relief. It's like, it's like clearing the palate between the serious pieces. So it's actually, I don't know if I've ever lost a gig because are you a comedian really? Well, I don't think, no, I have had one where they brought that up and thought that wouldn't be, but I think I ended up booking that one as well. Convince them it made sense. So that's how comedy. That's how the comedy and the serious work together.
Sure. I've spent some time in a Toastmasters organization, and as a podcaster, you gotta train yourself on how to speak to an audience. Much different speaking to a camera than it is in front of an audience of 5,000 people. But some of the best speakers I've known are aware of those skills of having comic relief and having a serious tone to really hone in that message for them.
Yeah, if I can make them cry and make them laugh, if I move them from pole to pole and back, then there's an expression in the speaking business. They'll probably not remember what you said. They will remember how you made them feel.
Right, absolutely. So as I was looking through some of the stuff that you've done, you're now a coach as well. You help businesses and people who want to become public speakers do things like land TED gigs and get book deals and things of that nature.
Yeah, book deals are outside my purview. Landing TEDx gigs. What most of my clients are either starting a speaking career and they want the TEDx to kick it off, or they have a speaking career and they want to up their game with a TEDx. And so I take them through the application process. And then if they get the audition, we prepare them for probably what they're going to ask them at the audition. And then if they get it, then we work on the 12 to 18 minute actual talk. So, and then along the way, we do speaker marketing. Do you have a speaker website? And does all your social media reflect you're a speaker? So you begin to brand them across all those platforms, because oftentimes nowadays, when somebody thinks about hiring you for whatever, they're going to hit social media and see if they can find you and see who, see what you're like, how you behave. Yeah, you got to be very careful nowadays what you put up on Facebook or whatever.
Sure. Now, I've seen a couple of TED Talks. I actually did watch one of your talks on TED. Most famously, the TED Talk I remember was with Simon Sinek. But why would somebody want to be on a TED Talk as opposed to anywhere else? Is it just because of their branding, or?
Yeah, branding. You see the TED letters behind me. My clients, once they get the TEDx, they'll have a thumbnail on their, a picture on their homepage with the big red letters behind them. So that gives them instant credibility. And then a button that says, see them in action, and takes them right to that TED Talk. So it's not going to get you an engagement or a booking, but it's not going to hurt, especially if you're up against a couple of people who don't have one.
Sure.
The TED, it says that somebody, a third party, has vetted you and thought it was an idea good enough to stand on a big red dot. And so that's the credibility. 6 of them, it's whole different. Clients go, here you got TED Talk, 6 of them. I'm sorry, did you say 6 of them? I did. Working on 7, 8, 9 right now.
Well, very good. But you spend a lot of your time, like I said, coaching people. And how do you actually, book yourself? How do you find the clients that you're looking for? And what are they actually coming to you for? Is it because, there's lots of places you can learn about public speaking. Is it just because you're experiencing with TED, or how do clients find you? What makes you credible?
Well, 6 TED Talks. Somebody said to me, what qualifies you to teach this? I said, well, apparently I'm really good at it. I use Twitter and LinkedIn. I've got a guy who runs an algorithm for me that looks for people who might want a TEDx, like speakers, authors, Toastmasters. If that's in their profile, then the algorithm sends them a message. And when they respond live, if they respond live, I'm right on top of it with a live message, not an auto respond, but a live message. Hey, that's great. Let's set up a time on the calendar. Here's my calendar. Okay. So both Twitter and LinkedIn, I do that. And I'm pretty much focusing all my marketing on LinkedIn because it's business to business. I got 24,000 connections, I guess, followers. So I'm focusing on LinkedIn. Also on SEO. Hopefully, if you went to put in TEDx Coach or TEDx Coaching, I usually oftentimes come up on page 1, sometimes page 2. For the mental health speaking, my track record is a little better. If you typed in suicide prevention speakers, dental, because that dental is one of my markets. On page 1, you'd find 3, 4, 5, 6 organic listings for me. So the speaking gigs and a number of TEDx talks come by way of SEO. But then again, Twitter, outbound marketing on Twitter and LinkedIn. I just hired a company that gets you engagement on LinkedIn. And man, I was getting, reaction or 2, comment or 3. And I looked yesterday at one of the posts they put up for me, 191 reactions, 47 comments. That's some engagement. Right. So yeah, I'm old, so it takes me a while to tumble to the fact it's not just, putting it up on the platform. You need, the algorithm's watching to see anybody care. Then they move you up, higher in the
sure.
purchase. Yeah.
Well, Frank, I'd like to dive in a little bit to your history because you talked about the life of a comedian, and 2,600 days that's how many years is that? 7, 8 years in a row?
7 years and change, my friend. Never cleaned the bathroom. I'm telling you.
Right. And you had the privilege of bringing your wife along with you. So I'm sure she kept you in line at some points.
Yeah. And, she's my girlfriend. Right before we left, I said to her, I'm going on the road to be a stand-up comedian full time. You want to come along? Figuring she'd say, oh, hell no. And she goes, yeah. So we gave up the apartment, our jobs, put a bunch of stuff in storage, and jumped into my tiny Dodge Colt. Right. And took off across the country. And we didn't mean to go on the road for that long, but it was that mid-'80s to mid-'90s was the comedy club boom. There are comedy clubs everywhere. Sure. One-nighters, two-nighters, full weeks. So you were able to stay booked year-round. And all she asked was, when we got done, could we come back to San Diego where we were living at the time? I started at the Comedy Store in San Diego. It's a branch of the one It's in LA on Sunset.
Mhm.
So yeah, so late 1980s, we went back to San Diego, and then on to Northern California, and then all the way up here to the Northwest, where we're in Eugene now. This is probably last stop, Michael.
Right. And so that's quite a life. I mean, not only are you meeting interesting people, but you probably have a few temptations coming your way here and there. And
Yeah, nobody wants to sleep with a comedian. Rock, the drummer in the rock band even get, the lead singer, of course, maybe the bass player. Yeah, no, my lovely wife and I were on the road together, so we were sort of the June and Ward Cleaver of comedy.
Okay.
There were comics, and both vegetarians, both worked out every day.
Mm.
Came home after the show, didn't stay out and drink, and so there were comics near the end of our road career. They would tell their manager, "Look, I need 3 weeks with Frank and Wendy. I got to dry out, get some exercise, and eat right."
Sure.
So she was, like a den mother on the road sometimes.
Right. Like I said, kept you in line, prevented you from getting into trouble.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we had a ball. I mean, those people, comics, there are some that didn't have any common sense whatsoever, but they were all very intelligent and interesting and, dear God, funny. I mean, there were some just, make you cry funny people, and very few, who were unpleasant.
That's good. I want to turn a leaf here and talk a little bit something about something more sober. I noticed in your profile you've done some training with businesses as far as what happened during the COVID-19 year. I mean, we're still living this, and we have to talk about social distancing and.
Oh yeah, again. Yeah, can you hang on 1 second?
Yeah.
Just got it. Wendy, would you call and tell them I'd like to come take a look at probably buy it off of them and like to come take a look? Yeah. Thanks. One of the neighbors put up a Gold's Gym in good condition, and I work out. Did I tell you I was a bodybuilder? Did I tell you?
No.
Okay. Well, it ties into your question actually. In March of 2020, I realized that mentally ill people, most of the ones who are high functioning, have what's called a self-care plan. Because we wake up in an uncertain world every day, regardless of the whatever's going on elsewhere. And then I realized it's transferable. So I was doing podcast after podcast after podcast, and by the way, keynote after keynote after keynote on how do you create a self-care plan and some other techniques that people with mental illness use simply to get out of bed in the morning. Because what was happening, I thought, was you get a lot of neuronormal people, never been depressed. Along comes the pandemic. Everybody's life turned upside down. Now, they may be depressed, but do they know it's depression? I mean, if you'd never had it, how would you?
Sure.
I give signs and symptoms like eat too much, can't sleep, sleep too much, can't eat. Or let your personal hygiene go, because you can't drag yourself out of bed in the morning, run a little wash, take a shower. So I was teaching neurotypical people what mentally ill people do to, like I said, get out of bed in the morning, simply move forward. And I think it was a revelation to it's that simple. Yeah, it's that simple. And but let me give you the through line before I tell you what I do. Everything you're about to hear are things I can control. That's what mentally ill people, you just control things you can't control, let the rest go. I mean, because you just haven't got the bandwidth. Sure. So mine is diet. I'm on the keto diet, and I eat, and I do intermittent fasting. I eat one meal a day, somewhere between like 20, 22 hours between meals. So diet, exercise. There's a gym here in town. Thank God, finally opened back up. And this is I don't know if your viewers can see.
Oh, that's you, huh? Okay.
Yeah, that's me for those of you who are listening and not watching, that is if you left Arnold Schwarzenegger in the dryer too long, that's what but that exercise is part of my self-care plan, because I believe you should have a hobby outside of what it is you do, completely outside of what it is you do. And you know, with lifting weights and working out, I never even have to open my mouth. And of course, I do nothing but run my mouth in what I do. So it allows me to achieve, to see, you know, the results. And I've had 2 aortic valve replacements, double bypass, heart attack, and 3 stents. So part of it is for my cardiac health. So diet, exercise, a good night's sleep is restorative. Meditation, I meditate twice a day, usually after a meal. 30 minutes is a guided meditation, takes you down, brings you back up on the other end. And medication. I didn't take medication for a long time. And I turned 60. My wife goes, just ask your doctor for something. So I said, hey, man, I need some antidepressants. And he goes, why would you need those? I said, because I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Couldn't write this prescription fast enough. And here's the deal. 1/3 of psychotropics, you know, psych meds, work spectacularly well for people. 1/3 of the people, and the other 1/3, it's horrible. Side effects, not working. I'm not depressed. I'm not happy. I'm nothing. I can't live like this. Right. So my advice is, if it's not working for you, get the cheek swab DNA test, where they can tell you, and they take your DNA and they try to match it with the antidepressant or 2 that'll work best with your metabolism.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's what I would do. If this one had not worked so well for me, I would have done that immediately to figure out which one was 1 or 2 were the ones. You know, you get a lot less of that, you know, go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. Not quite so much the lab rat. So diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication, and something called gamification. Gamification, if I can't get out of bed, I make a list. There's a do list of 6 things. The game is, when I scratch off number 6, I can go back to bed. I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight, pull the covers over my head and do what I really want to do, which is binge watch Netflix. I win. That's the game.
Okay.
And finally, they asked an astronaut who'd been in the space station for a solid year, how do you handle that kind of social isolation? He said, 1 word, routine. I go to bed about the same time, get up about the same time, exercise same time, eat my meal same time, binge watching Netflix same time. So he had, you know, again, the through line is control the things you can control, and you got to let the rest of it go.
Yeah, we noticed in this country that there was a spike in suicide because of a pandemic, and you know, the isolation has just killed people. I know people in my life who suffer with depression and bipolar, and so I understand that sometimes they can have a good day, sometimes they can have a bad day, but there's millions of people out there, like you said, probably don't even realize that they have symptoms or they have something going on.
How would they know?
Be able to tell.
Yeah, how would you know? If you've never been there, how would you know? So that's why I gave them signs and symptoms, you know. And if it happened to be a loved one, what do you say? What don't you say? What do you do? What don't you do? So, yeah. So then I was doing those virtually, 1 keynote like that a month virtually. Fortunately, you know, business has come back in the speaking arena. I've got 5 bookings in September, 1 pro bono virtual, 1 for money virtual, and 3 live at this moment. You know, you never know. I could have known tomorrow, well, we're going virtual.
Yeah, you know, I've been to several corporate events in my career. I not so much anymore since I've gone independent. But you never hear a topic like that brought up. But I'm sure that it is a huge demand. I mean, people trapped in these jobs, and you know, the social isolation they have. Sometimes they can't even go to work. And so I'm sure you're providing a valuable service to these businesses, because you know they don't want to lose their employees. And you know that suicide is such a tragic thing anyway.
I specialize in 5 or 6 industries, occupations, that have a high rate of suicide: doctors, dentists, veterinarians, attorneys, construction, and agriculture. There are 6 of the top 10. And so they have meetings, annual, the association, whatever. They have money. They use outside speakers most often, and they really have a need to hear what I have to say. That's what I tell my speakers. Look, they got to have an annual meeting. They got to have, you know, enough money to pay your fee. They got to use outside speakers, because that's what you are. And they really have to need what you have to say, because I don't care how good the speech is. If they don't need it, why would they buy it? So
why do you think those 6 industries are in the top? I I'm curious. You said
Well, construction is male heavy, and
Okay.
it's tough men, and 8 out of 10 people who die in the U.S. as of this moment are men. Most of them age 45, 54. Most of them Caucasian, actually. And so construction is male heavy. So that would, by the percentages, that would give them a higher rate. Dentists and veterinarians both come out of professional school, dental school, veterinary school with $350,000 in student loan debt on average.
okay, sure.
So no matter how successful your practice is, that's a big nut every month.
Mhm.
So, and it's not suicide that's the big killer in veterinary medicine or dentistry. It's stress, darling, stress, induced or exacerbated mental and physical ailments like high blood pressure, stroke, heart attack, and of course, depression, thoughts of suicide.
Now, have you been able to work with younger professionals or even students in school? Because I know that there's a high rate of that going on. Or is it mainly just older adults that you speak to?
No, actually, I do colleges as well. I don't do high schools as of yet, but a friend of mine is putting together a tour where you get like 3 high schools in a big stadium, and they get to select their speakers. They want a motivational speaker, or inspirational, or suicide prevention, or whatever. So currently, I just do as far down as it goes colleges, because three college students a day die by suicide every day.
Yeah.
So again, it's not an industry, but it's a slice of the population that has a serious problem with suicide.
Mhm, mhm. Sometimes just being that friend. I mean, obviously you talked about making a checklist. You talk about having a routine.
Mhm.
Just being that listening ear can really help somebody, right?
Yeah, actively listen,
Mhm.
and don't be scared, because you're probably going to hear some disturbing stuff. Make sure you're in a good place physically and mentally when you do it. Make sure it's a quiet place where you can't be overheard. I usually let them select the spot, and then make sure you don't have anything backed up against another appointment as they're telling you they're about to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Not constantly looking at your watch, and turn your smartphone off so you can actively listen, and just listen. Yeah, and don't do this. Don't should all over them. That's a mental health expression. Don't should all over them. You should do this and you should do that.
Right.
Better just to listen.
So now you said that you were very close. You tasted the barrel of your gun,
Yeah.
and you had somebody that actually, I don't know, how do you say it? How did you not go through with it? It's kind of a weird question, but what was that experience like?
No, it's a great question. I'm sure other people wondering the same thing. Why didn't you pull the trigger? Well, I sold insurance out of college. You talked about selling insurance, and I had sold life insurance, and I knew that my life insurance policy had a 2-year suicide clause. It's called the incontestability clause in legalese, but commonly known as suicide clause, meaning that if I kill myself in the first 24 months, the policy was in force. They just give you back your premiums. They don't pay the death benefit.
Right.
After 24 months, they pay the whole thing. And I had $1 million in life insurance, and we just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So, I thought I can fix this. So I called up my agent, and as luck would have it, I'd only paid in 22 months. I had to wait 2 months to kill myself. But because I have what's called chronic suicidal ideation, meaning suicide is always a solution on the menu for me and my tribe for problems large and small. When I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. So when I realized I had to wait 60 days or 62 days or whatever it was, I thought, I can do that, because come day 62, I can kill myself, no problem. Yeah, it's ironic that thought process, the chronic suicidal ideation, helps keep me alive, because suicide is most often not about wanting to kill yourself. It's about simply wanting to end the pain. And because I know I can kill myself at any moment, made that decision already, then I can stand a great deal of pain, because I know I can make it go away. So all about control again. Control the things you can control. So that's the story.
That's amazing. Now, have you had do you ever have an experience with somebody that was really close to you who was suffering the same thought process? that you were actually able to intervene?
Oh yeah, I've got a comedian friend. She calls up. She goes, "Do you want to hear the story of how I got into comedy? It's kind of dark." I said, "I love dark."
Okay.
She said, "Well, I'm working this association in DC, and I'm miserable. A good job, good benefits, but I hate it. My only joy: 2 open mic nights a week doing comedy." She goes, "You know," and then I got to realizing that I was depressed and suicidal, and that if I didn't pursue comedy as a career, I was going to kill myself sooner rather than later. And I said to her, "Let me finish the story." She goes, "Okay." So then you said to yourself, "What the heck? I quit the association job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can still kill myself." She goes, "How do you know that?" "No, honey, I lived it."
Mm.
Because I thought I was the only one that ever had that thought process. As many mentally ill people think they're the only one. And I thought I was the only one that ever thought that kind of crazy thought. I didn't know it was a thing called chronic suicidal ideation. And I've met probably another 3 or 4 people, entrepreneurs, entertainers, same basic thought process. You know, living a life they thought they didn't belong in, and had a dream they thought they belonged over there. And they realized, if I stay here, I'm done.
Mhm.
So what have I got to lose? I'll put it all on one, roll the dice, and see what happens. So that was the power of being suicidal. Was if I stayed put, I'm dying. So might as well give it a shot.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talk about some of these celebrity suicides that have happened in years past. People who have inspired me in the past, musicians, and I think of the comedian Robin Williams comes to mind, right? And all of a sudden, people ignorant of what you're talking about, the suicide ideation, that depression that they're holding. You would think that somebody is popular, is famous, is probably wealthy, that thought would never come across their mind, but it's not even a status point in your life that caused that. It's something else.
Yeah, and for me and people like me, it's generally not situational. I've been most depressed at some of the best times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was worried what would happen if it was the worst time in my life, and I found out. But generally, it's like a wheel. It's got a flat spot on it, and every now and then it comes around, and you begin to cycle down. And everybody has a cycle. Mine's 3 days. Some people's last up to 3 weeks, and it recurs. Just with the medication, doesn't come around as often, is not quite as deep. But and Robin, I believe, although he never admitted it, I believe he was living with bipolar disorder, as manic as he was. Yeah, met him, worked with him for a couple of shows down in San Diego, and I was a doorman in the world of comedy.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice guy. Not manic off stage in the least. But his 2 shows were almost identical. And people go, "Wait a minute, I thought that was coming off top of his head." I said, "That's the magic. It looks like it just occurred to him." Yeah. So, and my 3rd TED Talk was called Mental Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness, because I kept noticing that there were some very talented people who were also very mentally ill. And I thought, this can't be a coincidence. And so the talk starts off like this. What if those of us with a mental illness are not living with a genetic mutation, but an amazing evolutionary adaptation? In other words, I've got the depression and thoughts of suicide, but I think it's simply the flip side of my comic ability, creativity, imagination. It's 2 sides of the same coin. I really don't believe I'm broken. I believe I just happen to be made this way, because that's the way my brain. I can teach you to write stand up and perform stand up. I cannot teach you to process incoming information the way my brain does, because it's different.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, the wiring somehow crossed up, and part of it makes me depressed, and part of it makes me extremely funny, and also very fast with hecklers. I've said things back to hecklers. People come up afterwards and go, "How did you think up that fast?" Honestly, I didn't think it. It just came out of my mouth. I have no idea where it came from. I didn't consciously think it before I said it. So, and lightning fast.
Interesting. Well, Frank, one of the things that I do with my podcast here, I apologize for not starting off this way to kind of prepare you for what we're doing, is I call my show the Invictus Mind. Invictus means unconquerable. So I love talking to people who have not just amazing stories of overcoming problems in their life, but how to maintain a mindset going forward of, okay, I'm not going to let something get in my path. I want to go after my goals. I want to keep going. Obviously your story is unique to most people don't live the life as a comedian. Most people don't
No.
have that life in a spotlight, right? They don't have those extreme highs. But then again, I don't know. Most people don't have very, very strong lows. But I see you as an example of how to overcome, how to go forward.
Yeah, I think going forward, but not overcoming. I used to say that I fight depression, but that's inaccurate. Fight means
Okay.
I can win, and I can't. It's in my DNA. It's just the way I'm wired. Although there is some research in Canada on psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms,
Mhm.
that it may not just be a fix, it may be a rewriting of the brain. So it may actually, it won't be a patch, it'll be a fix.
Hmm.
We'll see. But I decided I don't fight depression, I live with depression. There's a martial art called Aikido.
Okay.
And basically it's the art of getting out of the way. Somebody throws a punch at you, you step off line, and you blend with their energy as it goes by. And that's what I try to do with the depression, is blend rather than resist, which takes a lot of effort. I blend with it and try to move forward with it, because it has a great deal of energy. So if I can harness that energy and move forward rather than push up against it and try to back it up, then I find I'm much more successful at dealing with it.
Okay.
So it's there's a guy who wrote several books on horseback riding, Mark Rashid, and he says you don't ride on the horse, you ride with the horse.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of what it is. I don't ride on depression. I live with depression.
So it's just part of your personality you have to deal with, and just like anybody else might have some kind of situation, and you just move forward day by day, right?
Yeah, and I've got one of my TEDx coaching clients has a TEDx on individuation. And I didn't know that was a word, but now I know. And individuation means, are you living up to your expectations, or are you living up to somebody else's expectations? Are you the person you came here to be, and are you doing the thing you came here to do? So one of the reasons that if I overcame, it was by listening to my intuition, which is telling me I didn't belong in insurance. I didn't belong with my first wife, although she's a wonderful woman. I belonged in comedy. And I did. I listened, and I took a chance, roll the dice. If I'd failed, I would have killed myself. So I think you need to listen. You need to ask yourself a series of questions. Am I living up to somebody else's expectations? Like, let's say your father or mother was a doctor, so they expect you to be a doctor. And in some cultures, that the pressure is relatively strong.
Sure.
So that's the question. Are you living up to somebody else's? Are you the person you came here to become? Are you happy with what you have become? And if you are you doing what you came here to do? I believe I was born to do stand-up comedy and speak. It's just, I told my first joke in the 4th grade. I decided right then I'm going to be a comedian. It just felt right. So, and like I said, when I got on stage, first 5 minutes of comedy, I heard that inside my head, you're home. I think that may be the key to overcoming, how many people work in jobs they could care less about. It's paycheck.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, some more than half the people I think surveyed, they're not thrilled with what they're doing for a living. I love to ask people, what do you do? They tell me. I go, do you enjoy that? And they hesitate. And that's the answer right there.
They can't even have excitement in what they're telling you.
Yeah. Now where I take them from there is this. I go, okay, if I could wave a magic wand, you could make a living doing anything. I mean, anything. What would it be? And almost all of them have an idea they've been sitting on. And I sat next to a woman. I asked her that question. She said, I can't remember what she said she would be doing. I said, well, if you quit your job, she set up exhibit halls for conventions. Would you and your husband survive financial? She goes, oh yeah, we'd be fine. I said, well, a year later, I get an email from her. Frank, you probably don't remember me. We sat together at a plane. You asked me what I would do. I'm doing it.
That's amazing.
Well, the thought had never crossed her mind she could do something different. I had to plant that thought, that subversive thought. Hey, you could do something different.
All right. Well, that's good. You never know when you can actually make an impact in someone's life that'll turn everything around.
Well, and that's what the clients bring me in to do. We talked about how difficult it is. People don't talk about, even though one person dies every 9 minutes in the U.S. of suicide. That's 146 a day. That's a 737 going into the ground like a lawn dart, losing everybody a day. Right. But if you start the conversation, mention the words depression and suicide out loud, almost everybody has a story. So they hire me to come in, be vulnerable, get up on stage, talk about my mental health issues, shed a tear as I tell the story or stories. And what it does is it gives people in the audience permission to give voice to their experiences and feelings without recrimination. I tell my speakers who are going to speak on mental health, you need to do a 45-minute keynote, 15 Q&A, and then set aside another half an hour, because there are going to be people lined up to talk to you before you leave. Each one has a story or a question about mental health. Happens over and over and over again.
Well, great. Well, Frank, I really appreciate you sharing me some of this information. I know that you said you have 7, 8, and 9 lined up for TED Talks. I also noticed that you have a couple podcasts that are you hosting them, or you were just on podcasts?
I have a podcast called The Suicide Prevention Punchline, because so many comedians kill themselves. And I'm a co-host on one called The Funny Shrink. I've got a friend who's a comic and has a master's in social work practice and the Funny Shrink University. And I guess I most often guess, because that means, you know why, Michael? Because you're going to do the heavy lifting. You're going to do the editing. You're going to put it all together, do the show notes, and then you send me a link, and all I have to do is put it up on my social media. It's great.
There you go. So that's a easy way to get exposure for all those wannabe podcasters and everything like that. So
yeah, I tell people, look, if you don't want to take the time to record the podcast and edit it, whatever, just be a great guest on somebody else's podcast. Let them do the hard work.
Exactly. Well, that's great. Then I was going to ask you to plug anything that you're doing, but obviously Frank King can be found on social media, like you said. Any last parting words that you'd like to leave?
Yes, the website is The Mental Health Comedian, thementalhealthcomedian.com. If you go there, writing a series of books on men's mental health with 2 other authors. And the first one, if you put your email address in, you can download a free MP3 of the first book on it. It's on men's mental health. You can download it, and it's unabridged, and I'm narrating. So, and if you're a man and have an issue, or we're selling more of them to women who have men in their lives who they can't figure out. So, and it's called a Mental Mechanics Manual. It's a manual.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's techniques, exercises, resources. Each one has 12 stories, 12 guys. Each guy has a different issue, and then how they're coping. That's because men told us they want real men, real problems, and how they're really coping. Tell us how they're doing it, because maybe we could duplicate it. So.
All right. Well, his name is Frank King. He's the mental health comedian, and you can find him on the internet. So I want to thank you for your time, Frank. I really appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure, Michael.